Good morning, everyone. Niall Faris, co-founder of Third Curve. I'm one of the people on the list who has the 10th conference badge, and I know I don't look old enough, but it's true. And really, just on reflection, it's incredible to see how the conference is built and how the community is built over the years, and also that we have a bit more diversity probably in the room today than we had 10 years ago. So all great things to see. We still feel we're kind of at the beginning of the journey, but I thought I'd want to take a moment really. Hats off to Glenn and the team who sheer passion and determination have grown this group and seen it evolve over the years. Fantastic. Very much earn a slice of cake and maybe even a beer later, Glenn. Okay, so I'm going to do a double act with an old mate, Matt, on the popular subject that's COVID-19. It's kind of bizarre, but it's under the radar a little bit at the moment, and I'm not sure if that's a bit of kind of self-preservation. You know, we can't take any more COVID-19 in our lives, or whether world events and living with COVID-19 has taken over. But I'm just going to give a very quick case study on a project I was lucky enough to be involved in during COVID-19. Going to be quite quick, then hand over to Matt, who's going to talk about what COVID-19 meant for us, how we dealt with it, what the various challenges were. And then we want to go quite quickly, really, to leave lots of time at the end for a bit of a discussion on the topic. So I'll do my presentation and we'll have answers at the end after Matt's. Okay, so I'm just going to put the project in context. I don't know about you, but COVID's had this like weird mind trick, and we kind of blurred the last 2-3 years of our life. So I'll just try and take us back there, give a few chills maybe. A quick program overview, what the challenge was, how we tackled it, how we went about it. I want to touch upon some of the components of rapid delivery, maybe some lessons that could be learned for future projects, and also, quite importantly for this room, talk about the role that NEC played in the project, and then hand over to Matt, and then finish with some Q&A. So I'll take you back to summer 2020. What a weird time in all of our lives. We had the first lockdown, and we were entering into localized lockdown. Boris had announced his plan called Moonshot, which was to try and recognise the role of testing in the battle against COVID-19, with very ambitious vision to have capability to test the entire nation in a week. Some of us had realised that we are terrible teachers of our children and found a newfound respect for our schooling and our teachers. And so it was during the summer of 2020 that Third Curve were engaged by central government, initially to come in to test and trace, with the recognition that this thing had legs, was a long, complex, changing challenge, and to help try and apply some portfolio program management into what was, quite frankly, a madhouse. It was a very strange time. I was travelling every day into Westminster. We were based at the DHSC head office, 42 Victoria Street, and sometimes to escape the madhouse, I'd go for a little walk. And remember walking across Westminster Bridge, not seeing a single other human being, bus, taxi, anything. It was a little bit like a scene from a horror movie, to be honest. One thing that was really clear is I was walking into an incredibly complex environment and stakeholder group. Obviously, we had the big P politics. It was number 1, 2, 3, 4 on everybody's political agenda. We had a fascinating mix, actually, of stakeholders who don't normally come together and work together, and certainly don't talk the same language. When I arrived, there was a real heavy military presence within the COVID-19 task force, and whilst that was great and brought a lot of expertise and brought some much needed workforce power, sometimes the military love a crisis, and we were flipping from one direction to another direction to another direction, and it was incredibly hard to get hold of the programme and provide that more strategic, long-term perspective that was very much required. The DHSC, to be frank, were still in shock. They weren't really ready or built for this pandemic. They were going through a monumental transformation, and they were struggling. We had fantastic input from the scientific community, and I think one trick the UK government certainly did play off is to go out and find some of the greatest minds around the world from the scientific community to get together and to collaborate. And I know we talk a lot about collaboration at this conference, and it's really core to the ethos of the contract that we're talking about today. And I think a great example, actually, of that collaboration is what I saw from the global scientific community. And that was so important and led to things such as, the rapid introduction of the vaccine program. And, in terms of lessons learned, we could really take some significant lessons from that and look at how they came together, worked together, collaborated, and really delivered. We had within the program, we had some absolute visionaries and great leadership. The sponsor of our program was a lady called Dame Anna Domenechik, who's a world-leading epidemiologist. And I don't know if you've ever had the pleasure of working on a program with the kind of leader that you'd run through a brick wall for, but she was certainly that. She was very much the figurehead, and I've never seen anyone actually cut through red tape, bureaucracy and madness quite as effectively as our sponsor did. And it was real critical to success. We had a huge amount of flux. We were, on moving sands constantly. We had the introduction of new technologies to help with the testing programs, such as the lateral flow device that we've become quite reliant on. We had a variant and a moving target within the COVID-19, and we had the global competition in place for resources and specialist equipment and key materials. One of Dame Anna's real passions was she believed in the power of collaborating with academia, government and private sector. And she was utterly convinced that was the only way that we would get to tackle this problem. And off she went and made those connections, assembled a team, and we embarked on the project. So whilst we were initially brought in to look at testing as a whole, we quickly became focused that the current infrastructure that was being stood up, Lighthouse Labs, wasn't going to be sustainable and wasn't going to provide the throughput required for the challenge ahead. And this is an actual kind of cartoon sketch of the original concept of a mega lab. And it was really industrializing our capability to test and moving towards that vision that, there's going to be phases where we're going to have that capability to test the entire nation at speed. One critical component to that was leveraging kind of manufacturing and factory type lessons learned. But also it was to try and apply a gold standard of testing. And, I'm sure you've heard a lot of press, and you may have experienced yourself, that things such as the lateral flow, whilst they're rapid and you can do them at home, they can provide some misleading results. So this whole concept's based on EPCR, which is the gold standard of testing. So we quickly pulled together a task force to develop this concept and again start to collaborate and work with some of our colleagues and stakeholders. Our next challenge was to very quickly put together a business case for the challenge. And that was predicated on four core benefits. Firstly, value for money in gold standard. So at this stage, we were very reliant on a mixed bag of testing capabilities, and a lot of that testing capabilities was coming from the private sector and had quite a mixed price model. So not really a sustainable way forward. The business case for the lab, I think, put the cost per test at less than a third of what the government was paying at that time. We needed to transition and run down some of that network that we'd become reliant on, and build up that internal capability. And at this stage as well, we were just starting to see the vaccine rollout. So we needed to develop an approach that kind of sat with that vaccine program and could support that and could be scaled up and down. One of the things that, one of the big lessons learned for the UK government is that we got caught cold. We didn't have any of the infrastructure in place really to support the pandemic, and we saw some of the other countries that had previous pandemics had some of that infrastructure in place and could stand it up quickly and were more efficient in their response to the challenge. So a very important strategic decision was made that we're dealing with COVID-19. We're building up that capability and building up that expertise, but we also need to be mindful of the future and future challenges, future variants, and dare I say, COVID-20 and beyond. And I mentioned earlier that core to the design principles was that ability to scale up and scale down. So at the moment, if you look in the UK, all of the EPCR testing is being carried out by this facility. The facility is designed in a way so that most of the cost is in the workforce and in the reagents and consumables. So we're able to scale those up and down. So the next hunt was for a site, and this is where we lent heavily on our military partners actually, who were dispatched to go out, had a high-level brief, go out and find us some potential sites. At this stage, actually, we were looking at 2 potential sites, one in the UK and one in the north or in Scotland. Ultimately, we actually only ended up building the one site. We weren't sure whether we would have to build the facility, the actual shell, ourselves. The absolute preference was to take over an existing facility. Obviously, speed was of the essence here. Take over and repurpose an existing facility. So we identified a preferable site in Leamington Spa. So this is a huge building, 220,000 square feet. Used to be for storage of plumbing supplies. It was only partially used, and one of the key aspects of this site actually is it being in Leamington Spa was perfectly located for what we needed. In the middle of the country, great connections, both rail and road, around some cities and towns where we could get some workforce from, and also in a great place in terms of academia with Warwick University, Birmingham University, Manchester not too far away. So this was the preferred site, and we successfully negotiated with the owner of that site and took that site over. One of the outstanding things in and standout lessons for me in this program was obviously we had a real key set of context and circumstances, but we were able to go from concept to business case to mobilising to site within 3 months, and that's fairly extraordinary for a program of this scale. And I think if I look at my experience on some of the mega programs, whilst yes, you need to get the design right up front and you need to go through the due process, you can't help thinking that the front end of these programs is just sometimes taking too long and costing too much money. So now that we had our site, we needed to rapidly progress the design of the solution. And this is a high-level overview of the design that we fell upon. One of the big components of this is it's a modular design. And in effect, we finalised on 13 75-metre self-contained laboratory units, utilising manufacturing principles and efficiencies with a workflow system. So some of the beauties of that design are that we were able to build the lanes in isolation, commission lanes, get them contributing to the testing requirement, and then move on. It also very much lends itself to the scale up, scale down nature of the requirement. So just some pictures to bring the program to life. So following strip out, that's a view of the warehouse. One of the key components is it's got that kind of middle top picture. It's got great kind of logistical access for the arrival of the tests and the processing of the tests. And then you begin to see the fit out of those lab lines. And this was really leveraging innovation using liquid handling robotics and using state-of-the-art machinery and equipment to get going. Okay, so I'm just going to touch upon what were some of the real key ingredients that contributed to this program. I think, it's great to see today that we've got quite a lot of stuff on behaviours, values, collaboration. One thing that absolutely stood out is that, we had a common goal. I was fortunate enough to work on the Olympics back in 2012, and, one thing that people always say is, everyone's up for it. We can't miss a date, everyone's up for it, everybody wants to make the country proud. Well, we certainly had that on this program, and that kind of message was really hammered home by our sponsor, and we couldn't fail in this endeavour, and we all believed that going through this process, we would save lives. So we had to get the job done. Sometimes put commercials aside, come together, collaborate, and get the job done. Management and controls were going to be absolutely key here. On the face of it, it looks like we're building, loads of labs in a big shed, but it was so much more than that, right? So we need up to 2,000 staff to operationalise this site. We need to go for a complex regulatory approval to get the site signed off and the equipment signed off. We have to barter with the rest of the world on this equipment, on resources. So this was a big, complex program, and putting those program management principles in early really paid dividends. We went very heavy on getting some robust integrated controls up front. Very much the priority of this program was schedule, program, as quickly as possible. Well, we couldn't have done that without the controls. In terms of pace and momentum, we're able to use some procurement rules, such as Regulation 32, which fast-tracked a lot of that procurement. And also one thing, I do think the department did well is that kind of, there was this race for this equipment. You know, these robots, these machines, there weren't many of those in the world, and in many cases we won that foot race to get that equipment in place and provide that testing. The design was, again, we leveraged our military partners to help manage that design process. Fantastic design sprints, you know, moving the full life cycle of design, sometimes in a day for certain components, leveraging BIM, leveraging some of the technologies and advancements, and again supporting that kind of modular approach and modular delivery. In terms of the contract utilised, so for the main build, it was an NEC option E. So the employer, being the Department of Health and Social Care, MACE providing project management capability, and Balfour Beatty doing the prime construction works, and with Kia involved as well, doing some of the enabling and landscaping works. Quite a large, NEC option E contract, with very much, the emphasis and a risk being on the employer, which meant that we needed to put in place good people and good controls to support the administration of that contract. We tried to keep it as vanilla as possible, which was challenging, giving our stakeholder group, but fairly minimal Z clauses. The one thing we did change is for a project of this speed, some of the kind of standard timescales and periods of reply had to be expedited to support that. One of the things that really helped was to run a series of joint training and awareness programs at the beginning of the project. And to be brutally honest, I would say that on the client side, the employer, that was where it was most required. A lot of the employer hadn't actually used this form of contract before, and it was quite important to bring them up to speed. And I'm a huge fan in these joint training sessions, because it starts to build that relationship between the core component stakeholders of a project, get that shared understanding, and hammer home some of the key messages. So thank you for that, Glenn. And Glenn, I'm not sure if you've ever had one, but he's not afraid to make the session a little bit provocative and call out people who aren't quite getting it or understanding the contract. One of the absolute key parts was to run an integrated weekly program session. So I was determined to get as soon as possible to a robust first program for acceptance, and then have the parties on board together on site to do a walkthrough in the morning, and then run a joint program session. And we got into a really good patter of having a great program, and then having that program make sense on a weekly basis, and blowing up the critical path and the key decisions. And then it's very much our role within the client team to integrate that program with the wider works around workforce, equipment, consumables, etc. Clearly, change control was going to be key on a project like this, and there were some big ones, right? So one of the changes that we had to put in place was recognising the risk of variant analysis. We actually converted 2 of the lab lines into genomic sequencing variant analysis, so that we could process the results and then quickly test for variants. So rapid change control. In terms of the kind of the cornerstones of the controls, again, most programs I go on to, particularly at the early stage, I might have 6 months, a year to put my program control strategy, my systems in place. We didn't have that. So and to be frank, you don't need the 6 months and the hours long workshops, particularly with things like cloud technology now. you have the ability to turn on some of these systems fairly rapidly. So at the kind of heart of our solution was Oracle and Primavera. We needed that kind of gold standard planning system. We used Acumen to drive the quality of the schedule and the program, and also the 360 component to look for opportunities for optimization. Aconex was used for our NEC contract administration and document management and design management process. And one of the things I'm extremely proud of is, we were going from these sketches and concepts and God forbid working up this job in MS Project, and in 48 hours we switched this on and converted it and landed on a Monday morning with a control system appropriate for the challenge in hand. So it doesn't need to take months and years. So in terms of some of the kind of the key achievements as we see it, from business case to site mobilisation to construction to first testing was 6 months. That's fairly astonishing. And a benchmark for the whole site as a whole has been, normally this kind of endeavour would take 3 years. Well, we did it in a year. I think and I hope and I'm pushing for government to learn some of the lessons around how we can fast track and condense some of the early phases of these projects. And I see a huge opportunity there for future endeavours. We needed some inbuilt agility, and that was kind of core to the culture of what we were doing. We needed to embed new technologies. We had a moving target in COVID, variants, etc. And we needed that scalability and flexibility. So we needed to accept that sometimes we had to take a slight course correction. And again, that was really, that's when the strong leadership really did come in. And for me, the biggest one, and I've mentioned this before, was the collaboration. It was just so fantastic to see all of these diverse groups coming together, collaborating, shared mission, shared goals, and an absolute shared determination to get this thing active, to start contributing to the fight to COVID-19.